we had a majority vote to reopen the negotiations and deliberations.
Well, we didn't close them though.
Did we close deliberations? We're having deliberations continuing now. So if you're saying that you would like to make a new motion while we're doing the deliberations, sure.
Well, I think we have one open nugget that we have to tackle tonight, right? That would be the fund balance. We never really decided what we wanted to pull from
But-
the fund balance.
But that's on the revenue side. We haven't done anything
Right.
with revenue. So the revenue is gonna be at that set the mill rate meeting where we're gonna say, okay, based on what we now know we're getting from the state, based on what we know now about all our different revenue streams, that's the time that we would say, we need to adjust this revenue stream or that revenue stream. But that wouldn't be, I mean, right now, adjusting the budget, the revenue, the revenues don't impact the budget, as backwards as that sounds. The budget is how much we're spending. And the fact that we're offsetting, we're paying for some of what we're spending with a different revenue stream is how we're funding what we're spending. So the fund balance is one way that we would pay for the whatever number of millions that we're up to now. 72 million. So if we look at this total budget list right here, that's not one of the line items that impacts this 72,033,933. The fund balance isn't one of these things that adds up to that value.
But we are responsible for setting the mill rate and for understanding the
Yes.
tax burden. And we
Yes.
can't do that without half of the equation, which is revenue.
Which is what we're gonna learn as the state gives us our numbers, which last year was up until late May, which is why.
I'm not talking
we had
about
those
that piece.
conversations
I'm
then.
talking about the piece of the fund balance that we have to decide how much we're gonna spend. And we didn't, that I remember anyway, complete that discussion Monday night.
So that, again, is on the revenue side.
I understand
That's one
that,
of the
but
values that we're gonna make assumptions for the revenue. So, no, we have not determined how we're going to, if we're gonna accept it as is, or if we're gonna increase some other revenue stream to offset that revenue.
okay. Well, I would like to continue deliberations about the town and the Board of Ed. Because we made some motions, but we still haven't closed deliberations. So I would like to make a motion that we open deliberations on the Board of Education budget, reopen,
Well, we haven't closed the deliberations.
okay?
We had a motion to remove $2 million from, $200 million from the increase, $200,000 from the proposed increase in the Board of Ed budget. And that was moved, accepted, etc. There is nothing stopping us from having another motion for a different value.
Okay,
So, right now, what I'd like to do is talk about the capital, continue down that path. If we're done with the capital, and you could right now make a motion we're in deliberations right now. If you would like to make a motion for anything under the planet, you can do
Well,
that.
before we make any motions, if there's something that is bringing this on, I'd like to hear what it is that's bringing this on, this desire to talk about it further. I mean, we had a lot of information on Monday night. We've had a couple days to digest. We might have more questions. So if anybody on this board would like to discuss further, I think we owe it to them.
Yes, where I was mentally was, if there was a motion, then we could have the deliberations. You want to have the conversation before the motion, that's okay too. I'm okay. So if you would like to discuss why it is you think that perhaps we didn't make our best choice the other night, by all means.
all right, great. So I'd like to talk about the Board of Ed budget. So we made a motion to cut $200,000 from the budget. And I went home and scratched my head and thought about the work that was left in front of us to deal with the fund balance. And we never really completed the discussion about where that was going to end up with the mill rate. But as I recall, we weren't even getting out of the weeds of restoring half of what we took from fund balance, and we still would be at the over 5% increase in taxes. So I went home and I started thinking about it and looking through past budgets. And I came up with, where's my little spreadsheet? Anyway, since 2011 to 2018, as painful as this is to say, the Board of Ed budget has increased over 25%. I know, it hurts. Back in the 10-11 budget, which I'll find the sheet somewhere here. The budget was 38 million something, and now it's 47 something. That's close to $10 million it's increased over the last 8 years. And then I looked at enrollment then. I'm gonna find that sheet in my little book here, but enrollment is down 4%. I know this is hard to hear, but it is. So I said to myself, man, oh man, that is a tough pill to swallow. And I just think that's an important analysis the board needs to be aware of. Unless we take more out of the Board of Ed budget, I think we're going to price ourselves right out of town. I mean, I don't know how to say it more gracefully, and I was the one that made the motion for 200,000. So I started that ball. I wasn't sure that the consensus of the board would allow to cut more than 200,000. That was my feeling based on our conversations and what people were saying. So I wanted to get the ball moving and see where we were. And after I went home and thought about it, there's a lot of information that comes out. We're listening to each other. And I just went home and did some chin rubbing, and I said, I don't think that is where we need to be. So I'm interested to hear what y'all think about that. I know, John, you were of the ilk that you wanted to cut more, as I recall, from the Board of Ed. I don't know where you are with it, Jason. I don't know where everybody is, but I think we really need to look at this again because the budget's going up 1.2 million. And we've cut percentage-wise a whole lot more out of the town budget. And I have to, acknowledge Mark's efforts to turn around a 0% budget. I mean, that was what we need. And it goes back to what Eric was saying before. I mean, you guys put in a grassroots budget and, no, everybody's trying to do the right thing. I mean, there's no malintent on anybody's part. But I think when the budget's prepared, there just isn't a full understanding of how we are just getting decimated with revenue from the state. And I feel like it's just beginning to be understood, but if we don't do something different than we talked about Monday night, we're looking at, I don't know, Anna, correct me, because I'm trying to talk and think and all of that, but we're looking at probably over a 5% increase in taxes to the taxpayers, at least.
Yes.
Okay, and that's not what I want to be a part of.
I don't think you can touch these.
So, if I need to keep the conversation going and open,
No, if you're done, then I'll go down and I'll ask everybody else if they want to participate in the
okay,
conversation.
go right ahead, and I'm going to look for my data while I'm
So,
doing
John,
it.
do you have anything that you would like to share about the current state of the Board of Ed budget?
I think at this point, I need more information on the revenue side before I think about making any more cuts. Because, like you said, we don't know what the final number's gonna be.
Yes.
So I really don't want to get into a conversation about making any cuts at this point.
Thank you.
All right, here's my sheet.
Jason?
So, yeah, obviously, sure, I would like to see cuts and I'd like to see more revenue, but neither one of those are an easy. We're not going to create more revenue from the state, and cutting is difficult. But I looked at it a little bit more yesterday because I agree with everyone. I think, at 10 o'clock on Monday night, I know that I was fried. you look at the increase in salaries. Now, I don't know how much is contractually obligated. You have a rough number, 700,000, and then in benefits, you have a rough number of 500,000, which we can't change, which is basically 1.2 million. And they're asking for what, a $1.2 million increase over there this year. So I do agree with the numbers that Lisa does discuss. If these are true, I mean, I don't know the data, but from 2011 to 2018, if they went from 38 million to 47 million, and our population is down 4%, we're up 25%. Is it the aging population of the teachers that have created steps in their pay that have driven up the salary requirements? It's probably a little bit of the benefits. It's just very hard to make a decision with the information, not knowing what's going to happen with the revenue, what's going to happen with the, and I always, not the fund balance, but with the, I always confuse the two of them. What do we have, a shortfall, 350,000 to not put back into the fund balance as what we've
From what
discussed?
was pulled from the
Or-
previous, from the fund
so-
balance.
And Mark's budget, I mean, even $50,000, you look at it, it's tight, but, and Eric did a great job talking to us about, well, tell us where you are with where you want to be for a mill rate or an increase. And it's tough to say to the taxpayers, well, you're getting a 5% increase because the state wasn't able to budget their, for the state properly, and now they're cutting back on the towns, and now it's our problem. But I know you're looking for an answer. I don't have one until I know what's really going to happen with the revenue, and I don't want to put our fund balance in jeopardy, and then we go to bonding, and it just costs us more in the future. So I'm on the fence in regards to leaving it open or what we cut.
Okay.
I mean, I think $200,000 is probably on the lower end. I mean, but I don't know. I can't wrap my head around it exactly.
Yeah.
I understand and share some of Lisa's concerns about the size of the budget, the bloating of the budget over a series of years, the Board of Ed budget. But I feel as though on Monday, given the facts we had on Monday, which really haven't changed today, we have revenue in our head, we have information about the specifics of the budget. I know I came up with a number myself of 200,000 because I went through the different sections of the budget, and the few items that I did find that I couldn't justify, let's say, I added up, and I was in the neighborhood of that $200,000 figure. So my point would be, or my question would be, if we're going to somehow begin to suggest additional revenue be cut, or additional money be cut from that budget, rather, that we be very specific as to where in the budget you're looking at to find those items. I think it would, we just can't come up with numbers that we sort of hope for, which is something that Eric touched on a little bit, which is, and I made a note of it, and I didn't really speak to it, but I'll speak to it here because it's kind of coming up again, which is, I don't think the approach should necessarily be, come up with a preferred amount that we should or should not increase the mill rate or increase taxes. I think that the approach should be, you're looking at your revenues and you're looking at the expenditures, and you have to justify those expenditures in light of the revenues that you have. I mean, if there's some sort of information that's going to fall from the sky concerning grant money, big dollars, and we don't have it, but we think we're going to have it in a couple of days, or we're going to have it next week, that's a different story. But right now, I'm dealing in the reality that we have, the budget as presented by Board of Ed, and I can't justify an additional set of cuts unless, we're going to walk right line by line through this budget and say, you know what, I think we could work on that or this or that. I felt I did that analysis. Quite honestly, as I mentioned to you, I went through every single thing, and I mentioned to you the items I thought that you could cut. But without that evidence, I can't change my position, so that's where I'm at.
Thank you. Camille?
Well, I think just listening to everybody shows that we each have very different and varied opinions about how to approach the budget and what our role is in the process. I don't feel like this year is similar to last year at all, in that we were chasing a number every couple of days. This appropriations committee was going to meet, and then this was going to happen, and then Malloy was going to, meet and change the budget. Like, I am hoping with all the questions that I've asked and the answers that I've heard that we can pretty much rely on the revenues as they're presented to us. Are you?
I thought I gave you different figures, which is appropriations wants to roll back the governor's cuts of last year and put it back to what they wanted.
Which would increase
There's
it.
still questions.
Which would increase it, correct?
It would increase, yes,
The
yes, it would
appropriations committee
increase
wants
our-
to increase it.
yes, yes.
No, but I'm saying
think
I
worst
don't,
case- Yeah, this would be worst case scenario.
for this year. Some of the concerns I have, though, are, for instance, that grant stabilization budget, and I was very careful to ask. To me, that sounds like that could disappear
I-
next year.
It's so,
10%.
so, yeah, so what, excuse me, so, with the ECS grant, the ECS formula was changed. And so the way it was done was to phase in either increases or decreases over a 10-year period. So like, if it was determined that, oh, by the way, East Lyme, you've been receiving too much in your ECS grant, so we're gonna need to decrease it. So the phase-in was gonna be, planned to be like over a 10-year period. So the municipal stabilization grant was established to hold towns harmless, so that no one would suffer more than, there would be a cap at the loss to towns of 5%. So that's kind of how that grant came about. And then the pilot grants, that was, so for 16-17, we received it, it was like 892,000. That year, it was funded at 66.7 million statewide. The pilot grants are for 18-19 are funded at $46.6 million. And so the question of, well, how does that impact East Lyme? Well, it impacts East Lyme on how much our share is relative to what the rest of the state share is, because there is a cap on the amount that's going to be distributed. And so that's how those numbers that we have were developed.
As far as, getting back to additional reductions, I don't even know what to say about that, because I'm the lone person on this panel that was striving towards I took a high-level view of it and saying this is what I think our taxpayers can afford in terms of an increase. And I knew we were never going to get to the reduction that I was looking for, which was over $1 million. But certainly I had hoped to land somewhere in the middle with my team here, somewhere between 200,000 and 1 million. It didn't happen. It didn't go my way. If it sticks, I'm okay with that. If you want to reopen it based on new information we receive, I'm okay with that. I mean, I just think, I understand your concerns, Lisa. Was a lot of information to digest. Then you go home and you think about what people say and the information that you receive. And look, we're human. Sometimes we can change our minds, especially when we get additional information. So I don't necessarily feel at this point that we're locked into it. I'd be willing to entertain discussing it again. I'm not sure if tonight's the night. A lot of times when we go to present at the town, right, there's a lot of feedback from the town, and people, based on what people's feedback is at that, then we can go back and, entertain whether we want to change something that we've already said. That happens all the time. So I'm really, not sure why we couldn't do that. I'm not sure how much support you'd get, or I'd get, or anybody would get, but it's certainly within our right to do that. So again, I don't know if tonight's the night. I hear what you're saying, Bill. It's like, well, until we see if the revenue numbers change, but I don't think they're gonna really change as far as the projections are concerned. So I don't know what would be different 2 weeks from now, and why you would want to entertain opening it up 2 weeks from now versus tonight. Other than we're all tired and. I
Okay?
don't know. That's kind of where I'm at.
Okay. So my position on the Board of Ed budget is that although I don't like the fact that it continuously increases, I've gone through it, like several other people have gone through it, line by line by line. And without significant decrease in services, losing staff, losing programs, I don't see anywhere to make cuts. I don't see it. And why I asked the questions the way I asked the questions last night was, based on all the reviews that we've done, do you see additional cuts? And the reason why I think we got to 200,000 last night, said it right that time, cool, is that we don't see any other cuts. So, to me, I'd love to say that we could do a 0, but I just don't see it. I don't see, without significant impact to services, I don't see it. So, to me, my humble opinion is, although last night may have felt pressured to come to a conclusion, I'm okay with where we ended up last night.
So I want to,
That's
I
my
may,
opinion.
I want to just add one process thing. So, Ann, I do want to respond to what you said about developing the expenditures and then dealing with the revenue, and that's what the numbers are. And for me, that feels like, this might sound like a coarse analogy, but it feels like saying, well, here's what I make for salary, and here's what I need to live on, and whatever the difference is, just gonna run up my credit card debt, or just gonna ask my parents to fund the difference. And I see it differently. I see that we have a responsibility to taxpayers to keep their tax burden within a reasonable band. And then we work backwards and say, if we don't have the money, then we don't spend it.
No, I mean, I agree with you in terms of, your analysis and
Yeah.
your example, I appreciate that. But I still feel that we've done the analysis of that budget and where to cut. I think the other big point or big chunk of that budget is your labor costs and your all of your costs associated with that. So there'd have to be a decision to, cut jobs, in essence, if
Oh,
you're,
okay.
or cut programs, as Bill mentioned. So, it just depends if you're gonna go down that path. But, that aside, I mean, right now you're in a contract that you really can't breach. We understand that that's, down the pike in terms of negotiation or renegotiating a contract. So, but I'm not in any way suggesting that we, simply, run up the credit card bill. That's far from my thinking. I'm really concerned about, our situation. We have a dilemma. I mean, we really do, whether it's our unfunded balance that we're beginning to, take little bits and pieces more than we used to. It's losing revenue. But I think unless we're going to really, as I said, cut the programs, cut the jobs, then you kind of have to go through that budget and trim any non-labor category that you can, which is kind of the approach I took, to be honest.
It's kind of where I am, as my head says, as the state gives us less money, we've got to build ourselves more money, which is why I'm trying to get us to get a grant writer, why I'm trying to get us to get people to build business cases, why I'm trying to work on the revenue side, because the state's not giving it to us anymore.
Yeah. I think we're.
Mr. Chair?
Sir.
One last
you
point. I
first.
just, to finish my thought there. Yeah, I think we're definitely at that juncture, and we as a board have recognized it because we've been thrown into the storm, and we've seen that we really, really need to, cut the ties with state grants and and move forward and start generating revenues as we can that, are not so dependent upon the state. So I think that's where we're at with that, but we're in a bit of a limbo, at the moment.
Mr. Chair, I did a quick cocktail napkin calculation. You're at a 1.3 mil increase with the budget that was voted on. Well, that you're where you're at now with the cuts that you've proposed, a 1.3 mil. The state revenue cuts to our town, and I went conservative, $1.5 million of cuts, represents 0.75 mils of your 1.3. 0.55 is a result of the expense side of the budget. We're going up 0.55 mils next year, all else being the same with same state revenues. It was the intention of the state to dump this on the towns and for us to determine whether we're going to strip the quality of life and the quality of schools out from our schools and out from our town services, or turn that into property tax. And that is essentially, I don't know if that helps you or not. It might be up to the taxpayers on May 25th when we go to the polls to maybe we leave it there and we say, you know what, here's your vote. If you want to keep the quality, I mean, not a zero. If you want to keep the quality, then you vote for the budget. And if you really want to say, you know what, we'll close the town hall 3 days a week, or 2 days a week. We'll open it 3 days a week. And we'll put 30 kids in the classroom. And we'll cut freshman sports. And we'll do all the things that, boy, they'll never do it. It might be coming in Connecticut. Because if the next thing that happens is they cut all $6 million, we're going to have to put it. How much quality can you cut, right? So they've already handed us this burden. And do we cut out the quality, or do we pass it on to the property tax? And that is the struggle you've had. That's what you went home to figure out. You're absolutely right. But 1.3 is significantly high, and nobody wants to sit in this seat and represent a 1.3. And I know you don't want to represent yours, but it wasn't our doing in this room. It was the state that did this to us.
Does this 1.3 consider, what's the fund balance use
So,
with that number?
Yeah, I don't know.
So,
Yeah, I don't know.
actually, the 1.3 mil increase was with revenues as presented with the original budget of the 72,036,140. So, actually, if the reductions of 249,000 that were made on Monday evening, then the mill rate would go up 1.19.
That's using 675.
That's correct, yes.
Oh.
So if we wanted to not use that much, the rate would go up higher.
So, but
It would go up a little over it would actually, so the amount of taxes would increase, so it would go up. over.
Can you repeat what you just said, Anna? I'm sorry, I didn't catch it all. You said,
Okay, so when we first started with the revenues, with the, as they were presented, with the $72,036,140.
that part I got.
Okay, so when on Monday evening, the total reductions were 249,000. So if we made a reduction in the taxes, then the mill increase would go up 1.19 mils.
0.119?
Then we would talk about it.
1.19. Did I say that wrong? I'm sorry.
1.1, and that was keeping how much in the, pulling how much from the fund balance?
We were leaving it as is. at the six-
675.
Right, so the adjustment was
675,
made
yeah.
with the taxes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't
Okay.
touch the 675?
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, I was just, and
Yeah.
The
like,
numbers are based on that.
Until, I mean, we're talking like, so many different things.
So the thing is, here's the thing with that fund balance. If we don't use it, I mean, yes, we can budget to use that in the revenue side of our equation, but we're not gonna draw on it unless we need it. So when we go to bond in, say, June for the schools, or is that the time?
Well,
So we're
actually,
still gonna have 5.2 million in our fund balance when we go for that initial bonding, right?
right, because what we're planning, what we'll do is, we'll go to market in August.
August.
Okay, and the reason The reason is, if we go in July, that means our debt payments are gonna be due in July, and, that, you know, it doesn't,
want that.
it's a bit, it'll be, a cash flow concern, because our taxes come in July, and believe it or not, most of the money comes in the last week of the month. You know, they trickle in all month, and the big dollars come in that very last week. So, it would present cash flow challenges. So, we'll go to market in August. So,
But your question was when we get, what are we evaluated our
well,
fund number being 5.2 or 5.2 minus 675?
5.2.
you know, it's all gonna depend on how everything, plays out at the end of this year. As I said, with all that occurred during this last fiscal year with Moody's and them coming back, in light of the state situation, when we did the call, the analyst, he was, I sat there and I'm like, whoa, because he was giving us glowing raves about everything until it came to the fund balance, and that was the one negative. Whereas, the reason that we're strategizing to go to S&Ps is because they give you equal consideration on everything. So they're gonna really give us a better fair shake with all other things relative. So, like, it's like they're saying, well, you're doing everything great, well, except for this fund balance, we want it to be 12 or whatever %.
Right.
They want it really high.
Wow.
15.
So we, you know,
Because the weakest link is where it's gonna break.
and so we just
We're
feel.
far from there,
that-
but I guess still I'm thinking that is one way to get that mill rate a little bit lower and have this budget pass the first time at referendum is by including all the 675 from the fund balance into revenues. And the point being that if we're going to bond in August, we're still gonna have $5.2 million in the fund balance because we're gonna return a little bit more from this year.
Mhm.
So it might even bump up to 5.5, right?
Mhm.
By the time we go to bond. And we're not really gonna start to draw on that until this time next year, in 2019, if we have to. So I think we're good. So what I'm trying to say, I think we're good if we keep the 675 in there.
As long as we don't use it.
And during the course of the year,
Bingo.
try to
Well,
make sure that we don't touch it.
if you just wanna actually look at,
The sheet. Did you
the
see the sheet?
history of fund balance
Yeah, you
use,
Yeah, this was really helpful.
if you
I
look
didn't look at it
at,
yet.
I felt, a 10-year history was reasonable enough.
It was
so-
very helpful.
So if you look, so in 2009, you know, up through, let's say 2013, we were applying 350,000. And then in, beginning in 14, that's when there was a huge jump of 750,000. And then the plan was to start decreasing it. So we did 1 year of decreasing it from 750 to 650. And then, from then on, the next 3 years, it was proposed at 675. And if you look at.
So on this sheet, if I could, Anna, the
Yep.
numbers in parens on the right show us the only years that we actually had to hit that we didn't return a positive number to the fund.
Correct, yes.
I want to reset to 2011.
I know, I was just looking at that.
Really good.
But you have to remember, during that period of time, the